Hello and welcome to another Econ Elastic video. So in today's video, we'll be looking at costs of inflation. So if you don't know what inflation is, we strongly recommend you go and look at our inflation introductory video, and we'll put that link in the description below.
In this video, however, we're going to take a more in-depth look into the topic of inflation, and this video is actually going to be the first of a mini-series covering inflation in a bit more depth.
So we're going to start this video by asking the question, what is the cost of inflation and is it a problem?
So we'll start with a really simple scenario. Let's say inflation is 10%, but your wages have gone up 10% as well. Well, you're going to notice very little difference in the standard of your living in this scenario.
For you and me as consumers, the only effect this would have is what we would judge as a fair price for a product. So, for example, the pair of trainers that cost £100 last year are now £110 this year. Mm-hmm. But your wages has also increased by 10%. So the new higher price would be still considered fair.
And from a firm's perspective, they would simply have to incur the relatively small cost of changing price lists, prices on their websites, on catalogues, and on menus.
And this is actually referred to as menu costs.
Unsurprisingly. So, doesn't sound too concerning at this point. The problem actually arises when wages don't keep up with this rise in inflation, and when inflation gets higher than what policymakers would like and begins to fluctuate. Remembering that policymakers aim for a 2% level of inflation for the most part, and when it gets higher, it starts to fluctuate. That's when issues start to occur.
And the first one of these issues is the redistribution of income. So inflation tends to redistribute the income away from people with fixed incomes and low bargaining power. So people such as shop workers or food restaurant workers. And
redistributes this income towards people and companies that are able to use their economic power to negotiate higher rent, greater pay, and more profits.
It also redistributes wealth to those people with assets such as property, which we've all seen in the last few years, and away from people with the type of savings that gain an interest rate that is lower than the inflation rate. Therefore, the savings over time will be eroded by the inflation rate.
Just to use a quick example on that, if you had £1,000 in the bank, and the bank paid you 1% interest, in a year's time, you'd have £1,010 in your bank account. If during this same period, though, inflation has increased to 10%, what used to cost you £1,000 will now be costing you £1,100, £1,100. So the purchasing power of your savings has actually decreased. It's what Joe's mentioned. The value of your savings is being eroded by that rate of inflation.
The next issue that inflation can cause is uncertainty and the lack of investment. Generally, the higher the rate of inflation, the more likely it is to fluctuate.
And this obviously makes it difficult for firms to predict revenues and costs, and therefore has the effect of discouraging firms from making investment decisions. And this obviously has the overall effect of reducing economic growth.
And something that we're seeing now is that policymakers are attempting to curb inflation rate by increasing interest rates. However, this actually has the adverse effect of reducing growth. Why? It's because money is being taken out of the economy. More money has to go to serving debt, and more people will try and save a little bit more because they'll get that higher interest rate. So it takes actually money out of the economy.
So how does inflation affect the balance of trade, Joe?
Well, Andrew, all things being equal, if inflation goes up in the domestic economy, so let's say the UK, it's likely going to worsen the balance of trade for that country, us. This is because exports will become less competitive on the global market. Therefore, imports would now be comparatively cheaper than the domestically produced goods.
In other words, imports would rise and exports would fall.
However, as we all know right now, we are seeing a global rise of inflation. Therefore, it's really dampening down this substitution effect.
So these costs of inflation that we've mentioned can remain relatively mild, usually when inflation remains in the single figures.
So what all countries want to avoid is inflation going into double digits and continuing, which is actually then called hyperinflation, when prices can rise by hundreds or even thousands of %, and that could even be in a few days, not in a year.
What you would see in this scenario is firms constantly raising prices in an attempt to cover their spiraling costs.
Workers will demand huge pay increases to try and stay ahead of the rocketing costs of living.
Prices and wages chase each other in an ever-increasing inflationary spiral.
So people then will no longer want to save money, as inflation is eating it away at such a great rate. Therefore, they want to spend it as fast as possible, which then obviously causes even more upward pressure on inflation.
People may end up reverting to a barter economy, and people have even been known to burn money as it became of such little value to them. We hope you've enjoyed this video on the cost of inflation. Keep an eye out for the next video in this mini-series.
Thanks for watching our Econolastic videos. Please check out our other YouTube videos on a range of economic topics. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
Please also check out our website at econolastic.com. The link will be in the description for you. This is where you'll find our step-by-step dissertation writing guide, which is suitable not just for economics, but for a whole host of degree subjects. And it's where you can also book us personally for 2-to-1 tutoring sessions.
See you in the next video.